Welcome to episode 4 of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. To returning listeners, thank you for returning. But to the new listeners, welcome to DualShock Graveyard. The DualShock Graveyard Podcast, I want to begin by saying, is everywhere now. You can't escape the graveyard. We are now at, let me see, where's my list? On the off chance that you're not listening to this on your regular preferred platform, the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is now on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. And I'm glad I'm bringing this up today because we are now on YouTube. We do have now a audio video on YouTube, which is great as well. And I would very much appreciate if you don't have to listen to the whole episode. You're listening to it right now on your preferred platform. But I would recommend going to the YouTube channel and subscribing to the YouTube channel because the channel is the official channel of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. And that is the channel where we will be hosting all future web exclusive content, which is on the way. And I want to use that to segue into what I want to talk about first. And what I do want to talk about first is my vision for the future of the pod. Well, my current vision for the podcast now, how it's slightly being compromised, and how I plan on revitalizing that vision in the future. But for new listeners, the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is at heart a gaming podcast. But if I had to sell the show, right? I'll just switch my notes. If I had to sell the show, the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is, again, a gaming podcast at heart. But what I feel would put us apart, because it's always good to have different, I'm a fan of many gaming podcasts and just podcasting in general. What sets me apart from other podcasts is I do have an intense, passionate love for the horror genre. It's funny, I listen back to older episodes, and every time I do say horror, I say it way too fast, so it ends up sounding like I'm saying whore. This is a podcast for lovers of gaming and for lovers of horrors, because we love horrors here at the DualShock Graveyard. No. Horror. I am a fan of the horror genre. It's my favorite genre of media in general. It's a really trippy feeling what fear does to your body. Being just absolutely terrified. My favorite type of horror movies, for example, is the ones that completely make you forget that you're watching a movie and just paralyzes you in absolute terror. That's what Hereditary did very recently. The final 20 minutes was just me. I saw it in the theaters with my girl, and I was frozen in fear. And it was that type of fear where you're frozen and all you can think about is just, holy crap. Not to spoil the movie, but I was going, holy crap, there are people in this world that live this way. And it just completely just threw my mind out the window with just fear. And just the overall atmosphere in general. It's just a really, really cool genre to follow. So I did want to implement that type of, not fear, I don't want to scare people or anything. I do just want to, set a cool, creepy mood throughout, not throughout the podcast, but just have it the backdrop of the show. And I was trying to do some research. I sat down for a while and I tried to think about what are some ways to implement that atmosphere, because to be honest, it's not as easy as it sounds, especially in my current format right now. It is just me and a mic right now. I am writing a really cool theme for the show. It's not like a theme song with lyrics that I'm not doing that, but it is kind of a little creepy intro leading into some rockin' instruments. It's a work in progress, but that's one way. But upon research, part of it was listening to horror themed podcasts in general, and a lot of them are just they're basically just a guy with a really creepy voice telling horror stories, basically. And if there's one thing that I am not, it is a storyteller. So reading alongside, the latest news in gaming, perhaps maybe taking a break, taking some chunk of time to, tell a horror story. I'm not sure how that would vibe. It sounds interesting, but, just thinking about it, I'm not quite sure how that would vibe. So reciting a horror story might not be coming soon. We do have some, quite a bit of gaming news to talk about, actually. I'll get to that in a sec, but, I feel like the horror aspect of the show, it's not easy to implement at this stage of the podcast, and that's where the compromise comes, that's where the compromise is happening right now. But I'm looking forward to what can potentially be done, and that's again why I say you should subscribe to the DualShock Graveyard Podcast YouTube channel, which is not called that. It's actually Ambient Jules, which is just like my Twitter handle at ambient_Jules, which by the way you should follow on Twitter because it is currently the official communication hub of the show. And the YouTube channel Ambient Jules, no underscore, same name but no underscore, is the YouTube channel. But that channel will be again where I host all future web exclusive for the show, and that's where I'm gonna have the opportunity to do a lot of cool, creepy shit. That's where I can, maybe have live podcasts set go to haunted houses, maybe have a live podcast in a haunted house. That would be really, really cool. And very exciting. Maybe set up a Ouija board and ask the spirits what kind of games they're into. Just something cool like that. That's an exciting prospect to me, and that's kind of where my love of gaming and horror can just come together inside this cool thing. Which, by the way, another mission statement for the show is to also keep it low and keep it accessible to everyone, because all of you, a part of being the listenership, you're also part of the show as well. I have gotten a bit of feedback for the show. I appreciate all feedback, mostly good, some critique, some are critiques, which again, I do appreciate the critiques as well. You do need criticisms in your life if you do want to improve. And a common denominator of the critiques is which I did realize upon second listenings of, because I do record, I listen to the full episode, and then I edit a little bit, and then I upload to my feeds. And the common denominator of critique is the mouth noises. I hear you, I hear it, the smacks. It's kind of annoying when I listen to it too. I would never eat on mic or drink on mic. I do have a nice cold beer next to me, which I do cut away to take a sip. I would never do it on mic. But the obnoxious mouth noises, the smacking, and I'm not a perfect human. I will work on that. I'm sure most of it is just self-control. So that is something that I will work on. No more mouth noises from your host. I am Julian, your host, by the way. I began this sentence by saying that I do want to keep this show at a accessible level. So all of you are welcome to message me on Twitter, tweet me anytime, subscribe to my YouTube, leave me YouTube comment. I do read all of them. One exciting prospect I am thinking about, though, is recording the podcast live on Twitch. Just the full unedited podcast with no breaks. Finish and edit the show live. And while I'm doing that, kind of communicate with the live audience while I'm doing that. That'd be a really cool thing to do. It's still a work in progress right now. We're on episode 4. But I do want to transition to some gaming headlines right now because there are a few things going on. In fact, as a matter of fact, we do have some breaking news right now. This has been a very, very long awaited feature that has been confirmed today. My source is if the official PlayStation blog is to be believed, which of course it is right in front of me. PSN online ID change feature coming soon. In other words, you can finally change all your cringeworthy PSN ID names that you couldn't change before. That is now official. The preview program to kick off with full rollout for all PS4 users, planned for early 2019. So, the preview program for this feature is scheduled to conclude at the end of November. So, the preview or the beta of this name change feature will conclude in November. So, some of you will be chosen to test this software, and they're using people who have previously signed up for PS4 system software. So, like, whenever PS4 is going to release, or Sony's going to release a new a system update, for like a giant system update, they usually test it out first with some people. I certainly sign up for that program that helps me, that hopefully allows me to be one of the people they choose to help test it. So they're using that pool of people to test out the name changes, but it will roll out for every single one of you early 2019. So that's really cool. This has been one of the most requested features, is being able to change your PSN IDs. For me personally, it's too little too late. Too little, way too late, actually. My first PSN name, I was one of those fools that would use their first and last name, which is something you should never do. Never use your real name as your PSN name, or your gamer tag, what have you. That's a mistake. So I remedied that immediately, and I started over a little towards the end of the PS3 cycle. I just started a new name, which is the name I have today to this day. So I have no need for this. But what you should know is that when the time does come for the name changes, the first change is free, which is very cool. I'm sure that's what that's all most people need. They just want to change it and just be done with it, and just, they have a name in mind, they want to change it, and that first change will be free. Afterwards, though, the change it will cost you $10 for non-PS Plus members and $5 for PS Plus members to change it again. You can change it whenever you want. The first change is free, but anytime after that you do have to pay, which, like I said, most people just need to change it once. But if you are just somebody who's just very OCD about what your PSN name is, you'll have to put down some money to do that. But first change is free. There you go. Change your names. I'm sure some of you out there have been eagerly waiting for this feature as well. You probably have that name that you made when you were in the 6th grade, and you've stuck with it this whole time. So you're just sitting there with the name, the Vag Assassin 420, or Panty Toker 6, or Sergeant Eat My Ass, or something cringeworthy that you wish you could change. Well, now you finally have the chance to do so. So that's really cool. Some very substantial big news to start off this week's episode. I do want to move on to something else that has leaked. Very exciting. So for PS Plus members, you get a select number of free games for free. Well, free as long as you pay the service. This month's free games is, of course, Friday the 13th, which I have downloaded, but I tried to play it back when my internet was down. And I know many people have said that it's a multiplayer game that is to be enjoyed with others. My PSN, or my internet, was down, so it wouldn't even let me go into the main menu, which is weird. It's concerning when many games nowadays require an internet connection. I'm sure there's I don't know if there's any single player content at all in Friday the 13th, the game. If there is, I wasn't able to access it, which is dumb. You should always be able to access any offline content without needing an internet connection. But anywho, Friday the 13th, and what's this other game? This one called Laser League, which, I don't know, it looks to be like some, shovelware. I mean, I've seen some gameplay. It could be some arcade goodness right there, but it's not really anything substantial that I'm interested in. But this isn't some script kiddie leak or anything. This was actually leaked by PlayStation themselves. They leaked November's free games. And these are two potentially substantial ones. Well, one is less substantial, but there is one that is mighty substantial. And they are, I have it on my Twitter, Bulletstorm Full Clip Edition, which is a remaster of a PS3 game. I think it was a Cliff Basinski game. And this one, Yakuza Kiwami, is one that I'm very excited for. Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the original Yakuza game. I've been wanting to get into the Yakuza series for a very long time. I've just seen enough of the game to convince me that it's something that I would really enjoy. It's this wacky, crazy Japanese game from Sega. It's a brawler. It's a bunch of different crazy shit. And I've been very curious as to starting this series. If there are any Yakuza fans out there, I would appreciate some insight as to what the first game I should play is. Because I know Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the first one, but I know they also came out with Yakuza 0, which is a prequel to the first one. So any insight of which one I should start with? I would assume that I should start with 1 first, because it's always cool to start off in the order that the games were released rather than the chronological, kind of like Star Wars. If anybody wants to watch Star Wars for the first time, I would certainly recommend them to watch episode 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, and 3, and then the new one, because that's the order that they came out in. So it's always cool to just follow the order they came out with. Any nuances from in between movies that you probably won't understand unless you watch it in the way they were released. So that's what I'm curious about, but I think I just might end up starting with Kiwami, just because it is a remake of the first. So that's really exciting. So there you go. November's PS Plus games have been leaked, and they are Bulletstorm, Full Clip Edition, and Yakuza Kiwami. I hope because they leaked it, they leaked it, the PlayStation leaked it themselves, so they can't blame any hackers or anything. And I hope because of that, they won't just, since it's been leaked, now they have to change it to keep it fresh. I hope they don't do that. That would be really shitty if they did, It makes no sense that you accidentally leak something and you got a whole bunch of people excited, all out of fault of your own, so you're just going to change it? I'm hoping they don't, and if they do, I'd be pretty upset, because I really have been meaning to get into Yakuza for a long time. Otherwise, though, I might just buy it myself if not, but I'll wait to see if I can just get it for free in November. So be on the lookout for that. So last week I talked about PlayStation canceling this year's PlayStation Experience. PlayStation Experience is their Sony's own little press show for PlayStation. The last year's in particular wasn't too great, but the year before was a giant press conference. That's when they unveiled Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. They opened with it, and that's the show where they closed with The Last of Us Part 2. And that was the show where I was hoping that, okay, PlayStation Experience, since E3 is kind of waning and it's becoming less and less significant, just with so many different developers and publishers just hosting their own press shows, I was hoping that this would be like, okay, Sony doesn't really need E3. They could just keep this hype in-house with their own press show. But this year's show has been canceled, which to some might imply that they have nothing to show, and that's kind of a bad thing, which the truth is they probably don't have anything new to show. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it just means that they've announced everything that needs to be announced for this generation, for the rest of the PS4 generation. Of course, there are the rumors that next generation is around the corner, the PS5, the next Xbox. Some most predicting that that's going to happen within the next 2 years. And Sony have already announced the remaining lineup for this generation. We've got The Last of Us Part 2, which is a giant one. That kind of like how the first Last of Us kind of ended the PS3 era. It was like the final big exclusive. The Last of Us Part 2 might fill that role for this generation as well. But aside from that, we also have the likes of Ghost of Tsushima from Sucker Punch, Dreams from Media Molecule. I'm sure they'll announce MLB The Show 19, which is the yearly baseball game, which sells very well every single year. There's a hardcore contingent of baseball fans that do love those games. What else? Oh, of course, Death Stranding from the great Hideo Kojima is also coming for the PS4 as well. So with those heavy hitters still coming, and with the PS4 still selling very well, I mean, there's a chance that PS4 will indeed surpass not only the PS3, which it's very close. PS4 is sitting at 82 million, if Wikipedia numbers are to be believed. 82 million. PS3 is at 83 million. That's easily going to surpass that very soon. It will surpass the PS3, and many are predicting that at the end of this generation, when it's all said and done, the PS4 will surpass 100 million sold consoles, which would make it the third best selling home console of all time, beaten only by the original PlayStation, which sold 102 million, and the PS2, which is the best selling console of all time at 155 million units sold. That's pretty crazy. That's a success right there, if I do say so myself. This has been a very, very successful generation for Sony. Good for them. So that being said, there's not really any market incentive right now for Sony to break up the momentum, so to speak. I mean, I'm sure they could just continue or just have a PlayStation experience this year, and they could just reveal that yes, the PS5 is coming, and here's the big heavy, which I'm sure they have. They have that in their belt. They could easily just whip it out whenever they want. They have that in hand to play. But with all the exclusives that are still coming that we already know, we know everything that's coming up, and we're all very excited. I do believe that they're just letting the PS4 continue riding its wave that it is. So they don't really necessarily need a PlayStation experience this year. But Xbox is holding its own event to call the XO Fest, I believe. I didn't write down the name, but the Microsoft are holding a Xbox press show in November in Mexico. So that's pretty cool. And if it's anything like Microsoft's E3 show this year, this should be watched by everyone. I'm certainly going to watch it, because one of the critiques, which isn't necessarily a critique, depends on how you see it, but definitely not a critique on me because I enjoyed it. It's really cool. But one of the critiques, if you would call it that, of Microsoft's E3 showing this year is that the majority of the games that they showed were multi-platform. In other words, available for PS4 and all that. There weren't really many actual exclusives that they showed, and the ones they did are, the ones from existing franchises. So if this press show of Xbox is anything like E3's, I would recommend everyone watch this, because there's a good chance that we're gonna see some new games, some new PS4 games, and I do predict that this is the show that will announce the next Mortal Kombat, which is one of the games that I'm anticipating to exist, which, according to the tweets of creator Ed Boon, he's been teasing it, tickling the scrot, so to speak, and we will get a Mortal Kombat 11 announcement pretty soon, and I do predict that it will be at this Xbox press show. So I would recommend everyone watch that. It's should be a good show, because the E3 show this year, I mean, Xbox had the best show this year. It was a multi-plat fest. So many exciting games were shown that, for everyone. So if this is to be to follow the same vein, the Xbox show should be a good show as well. So I'll be on the lookout for that, and I hope you will too, because more game announcements is always a good thing. I do apologize. This might be a shorter episode. I have a busy day ahead of me. I have to go and print out some documents. I have a job interview today. It's been a crazy hectic week in my life. Not to get too personal, but despite that, one of the highlights of the week is to always sit down and record a podcast for everybody. one of the highlights of the week for sure. Fun fact. Did you know that I've heard this somewhere? I forget where I've heard it. It might have been Sacred Symbols that said this, but Uncharted, right? So the health system for Uncharted, I'm sure you know, it's just you're taking cover, you're taking shots, the screen turns red, and then if it gets too red, you die. You would assume that the red represents like the bullets that you're taking, that Nathan Drake is taking in. He's getting shot at, he's getting hit with bullets. No. According to a developer, a Naughty Dog developer, apparently as you're getting shot at and the screen is turning red from what you would assume would be the bullets that are getting hit from him, apparently the red represents his luck running out. Like I guess bullets are whizzing by him, and I guess the red represents that he's getting lucky and that his luck is going to run out and he's going to get hit by one of these bullets soon. And when you do get hit by the bullets, that's of course when you die, like a regular human, because Nathan Drake is no superhuman, even though at times he could be. I mean, you can't climb that many ledges and not have super strength. That's impossible. But that's very interesting. So obviously, you know, if you undergo a combat scenario where you get point blank shotgun blast right to your face, you die instantly. Of course, there's no luck that'll save you from that. But if you're like in just a regular shootout, you're taking cover and you're popping out and you're shooting people and you're getting shot back, that red that's consuming your screen, again, which you would assume would be the bullets that are hitting you, it's apparently luck. And I guess in their logic, your luck runs out and you die. And that's what happens when the screen turns completely red. That's very interesting. I didn't know that. And when I first heard that, I'm like, that's kind of, but it makes sense the more you think about it. And that's something I didn't know. I figured I would share to any Uncharted fans out there. What do you think? I do want to end the show, however, on a very ranty note. I got a rant for everybody. And it's related to some old news. It's Sony lifting the ban on crossplay. It wasn't really a ban, but they're yielding on crossplay for Fortnite. And for those unfamiliar, there was kind of a controversy. Fortnite, as you know, is the most popular game in the world right now. You just can't escape the wrath of Fortnite. I've seen many YouTube videos of classrooms of children doing Fortnite dances and losing hope in all humanity, is what I feel when I see those videos. But goes to show the power of Fortnite. It's the most popular game out right now. And for most platforms, the PC, the Nintendo Switch, the Xbox One, on those platforms, Fortnite is cross-platform. I'm actually not sure if PC is part of that. If not, then that just shows even more my point here, which I'm going to get to in a sec. But PlayStation was not cross-played. If you play Fortnite on PlayStation, you're only playing with other PlayStation players. And that was a bit of a contention among some people as well. Not really towards me. Not just because I don't play Fortnite, but just crossplay in general is not really something that I've ever had a need for. There's always been plenty of people to play with. I've never played a game where there's been a fear of not having other players to play online games with. But to a lot of people, this was, to me, it was just bad PR. It's a PR thing. It wasn't good PR for Sony. And alongside that, that's one part of this. But there was another part to this. While Sony wasn't letting crossplay to happen on Fortnite, they also, which I think should have gotten way more content. This is actually something that I criticized Sony for substantially, way more than crossplay. But Sony also locked Fortnite accounts. So if you play Fortnite on PS4 and you've never made an Epic account, you would have to make an Epic account, on the PS4. But if you made it on the PS4, you could only use that account on the PS4. You couldn't take that account And the Epic account, which is a third-party account, you couldn't, let's say you want to make your account on the PS4 and then, you want to play the Switch version because the Switch version came out recently and you want to play it on the go with your Switch because you can, play games on the go with the Nintendo Switch and you want to use your Fortnite account, you couldn't do that. PlayStation was the only platform that didn't allow that. You could have made an Epic account on the Xbox and carried it over to PC, to Switch, what have you. That should have gotten so much more criticism than the crossplay thing, because that is just a substantially worse business practice than not allowing crossplay. You're talking about having your players create an account, a third-party account for a platform that's not even owned by Sony, Epic, and then having your players, play on the PS4, buying all sorts of loot boxes and buying lots of progression for their character, and not even being able to take that account, which again isn't owned by Sony, not allowing them to take it to other platforms. That was kind of egregious, and again, substantially worse than not allowing crossplay. So here we are, after that happened, and out of nowhere, Sony yielded and announced that they would start allowing crossplay on Fortnite. I'm not sure if that's been implemented yet. But on the same day they announced that, they also announced that they weren't going to lift the lock on Fortnite accounts as well. So as well as allowing crossplay, they're also allowing their players to take their Epic accounts to other platforms, the Xbox, the Switch, and the PC. Which, again, everyone's focus is on, or most people's focus is on, oh, the crossplay, this is great. We have full crossplay now. Which, my question is, do we? And I'm sure because the topic is Fortnite and it is the biggest game, why this was the focus of this thing. But if you take Fortnite out of the equation, what's really changed? There is no full crossplay. I mean, Fortnite and Minecraft were like the two games that were being used as an example of Sony's so-called evil of not allowing crossplay. So take Fortnite out of the equation. What has really changed exactly? There is no full crossplay anywhere. There is no crossplay in Call of Duty. There's no crossplay in Battlefield. We're still back to where we were before this whole thing even started. So this whole thing, I feel, was just a giant PR thing. And the most important flaw in business, trying to figure out how to word this. The most egregious business practice of all this was Sony locking Fortnite accounts on the PS4. That Sony backing down on that and letting people use their Fortnite accounts anywhere, that was just glossed over and wasn't really seen as much of a big deal. It's a giant deal, ladies and gentlemen. And Sony pedaling back on both these issues reveals a lot of hypocrisy. The most hypocritical of all of them being Bethesda. Bethesda, of course, are the developers behind, the Fallout series, the Elder Scrolls series, what have you. They went as far, Todd Howard, the executive producer over at Bethesda, went as far as to imply that the reason the upcoming Fallout 76 wasn't going to have cross-platform is because Sony, I've got the quote in front of me, you cannot do crossplay in 76, Howard told German publication GameStar. We'd really love to do that right now, but we can't. Sony is not as helpful as everyone would like. So he's implying that because Sony is being so stingy on crossplay, that's the reason why Fallout 76 has no crossplay. But Sony played their hand and went back. So now when Sony started allowing crossplay, a lot of people went to Todd Howard and went to Bethesda and said, hey, we got crossplay now, so can Fallout 76 be a full-on crossplay? And now, of course, we have Pete Hines, another director over there at Bethesda, saying, "Oh, well, we never intended for Fallout 76 to be crossplay." Well, okay. So then why would you make this giant thing over Sony not allowing crossplay if crossplay was never the plan to begin with? Which is, to me, is just a big metaphor of this whole issue. Sony allowed crossplay on Fortnite. Now what? Do we have full-blown crossplay now? Because we don't. There's no crossplay. I mean, there is crossplay. There's a lot of... I shouldn't say there is no. There's actually quite a bit of crossplay going on. Rocket League is crossplay, Minecraft, now Fortnite. I mean, you can count the number of full crossplay games on your hands, but we're still nowhere near full, legit crossplay. In fact, we have just as many now as we did before this controversy even began. So that's just my point, There are bigger situations that were happening that weren't really being paid much attention to. And this whole crossplay thing was just purely PR. And Sony, they got the bad PR out of there. And in doing so, revealed hypocrisy among the loud critics. So there you go. I do want to end this episode, though, on a personal note. Again, I do want to closing the notebook here as we draw a close to this week's episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. I do once again want to reiterate my vision for the show. The show is a gaming podcast, but again, I wanted it to be different from other gaming podcasts that you've heard, and the big difference I wanted was kind of to throw in a scary horror undertone to the show, which sounded really fun on paper, but upon researching how I could possibly do that, wasn't as easy as I thought, because the only obvious ways I could do that in recorded audio podcast form would be have creepy noises happening in the background or telling scary stories, which upon thinking about it just kind of didn't make sense. So at this moment, this podcast, I'm just purely focusing on gaming right now. As far as, I'll still keep the name because it's still what I want to do. But the point is, as we move forward, the majority of the horror stuff will come in the form of what I release on the YouTube account. On my YouTube account, which is like the I'm hoping that I could set, which is I'm saying two things at once, but I am going to release all web exclusives on that YouTube channel, and hopefully in the future I will have a studio, I guess. I'll set up a space where I can create this really cool set and really start implementing my vision for the show. So that plus I am hopefully planning on recording the podcast on Twitch as well. I won't be doing any live interacting with the audience as I record. It is just going to be as I'm recording now, but it'll be on Twitch. And people can talk amongst themselves in the chat. And then once I finish recording, then I'll start interacting with the audience. That would be pretty cool too. Lots of work in progress, but understand that the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is once again a gaming podcast with a horror twist as per my original pitch for the show. I'm still going to stay faithful to it. It just won't be implemented at least for the time being, as well as I'd hoped. But that is being worked on, and hopefully I will implement my vision for the show using all the available tools on the internet. So it's a work in progress, folks. I do appreciate you all for tuning in. The DualShock Graveyard Podcast is on all major podcast formats, including now on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at ambient_Jules, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. I got to get ready to go print out some files and get ready for this job interview. I do wish you all a wonderful rest of the week, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. Peace.